Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Mahadev the Thunder Wizard, and today we are going to once again focus on the 12 steps to transcend to 5D. We are now working on step 4. If you have not watched the first 3 step videos, please go back and watch them because you need to do these steps in order. Step 4. We listed all of our resentments, fears, and regrets about our 3D life experience so far. All right, so this is where the 12 steps really comes in, and this is where you truly begin to change. So remember, in order to be able to create a new world, in order to be able to create a new life, in order to be able to have the ability to shift into that level of awareness where you have to be operating free from these lower vibrations, first thing we have to do is we have to face those things within us which create those lower vibrations. So in normal 12-step work, in the beginning, a lot of people get really afraid of this step because for instance, in Alcoholics Anonymous, it says, took a fearless personal moral inventory of ourselves. And people think that means I got to write down all the bad things I did, or like I did first time around, not knowing what I was doing, I wrote a big novel about how I grew up and all the horrible things I lived through and what my mom did and all that kind of stuff. And I remember handing it to my sponsor, and he goes, "This is good, but this isn't the 4th step." And then he got out the literature and he said, "This is a 4th step." And it turns out the 4th step is very simple. It is a thorough inventory of yourself, but what you're looking at is what causes you to continue to seek out destructive, self-limiting, disempowering life, which makes you miserable. And it's very simple. It comes from your resentments. Resentments is just another way of saying being in denial of actual reality. Now, it's not your fault. You went through whatever you went through in life, and you have been programmed by life to respond negatively, childishly, and with anger. Little kids, what's the thing that's most, little kids are cute and fun, but what is it they also do? They also get very angry. They cry and they scream and they have temper tantrums. And so an adult is somebody who is able to have their disappointments in life and go, okay, how can I solve this? What's a good way out? And they take responsibility for where they are. So the truth of the matter is, if you're in pain, if you're angry, if you are a victim, if you think you've been victimized by the world, it's very simple. You're still in a childish, immature mindset. And again, I'm not blaming you for that. But in order to grow beyond that, we must take a look at those things. And then what you find out is that when you see how you yourself have created everything in your life, then you become very motivated to go, oh, well, if I can create all this negativity, all this poverty, all of this illness, all of this sadness and misery and feeling trapped, well, then that means I can create a positive role for myself. I can create anything I want. And this is when you truly not only grow up on just a basic human level, but now we grow into the next level, because in the 5th dimension, we're still, I haven't gotten there yet, but we will still have choices. But what doesn't fly up there is self-pity, anger, resentment. And if you're sitting around, spending time talking about how they did it to you, then you're full of resentment. We're in an interesting time period because, right now as I'm speaking, all kinds of really unbelievable things are being brought to light about what the powers that be, the elites, have been doing. Our governments, just it's just unbelievable. And so anger is a normal response, but anger is short-lived, and it's meant to get you into action to solve a problem. Resentment is when that anger lingers for long periods of time, and then it colors your whole life. Not only that, it creates a very toxic environment inside your physical body and causes all kinds of diseases. In fact, we can pretty much, look at any disease you have, and if you look at it from an energetic perspective, you're going to find that there's some unresolved anger, sadness, some negativity that's not being addressed, and it gets lodged in the body and it creates illness. So even if we weren't shifting into 5D, this would be important. So let me just go ahead and show you what it is. It's very, very simple. So again, what is the fourth step? We listed all of our resentments, fears, and regrets about our 3D life experience so far. So resentments are obvious, things that you're angry about, people, places, and things that you're angry at. Fears, this is important. People live in fear. Bear in mind that fear is a self-defense response. So if you're living in constant fear, meaning if you walk around with a victim mentality, if you walk around talking about this prison planet that you live in, or that you've been forced into continuously reincarnating, and false beings of light are tricking you into reincarnating, you're in a state of fear. You think that you're awake because you think you're pointing out what people are doing and what they're doing to you. But if figuring that out doesn't give you the awareness of what to do to go beyond it, then you're just stuck in a state of fear. So the reason why fear is addicting is because fear is designed to protect you from harm. Now, here's the fact, though. There are only 3 inborn fears. The fear of heights, fear of falling from heights, the fear of loud noises, and the fear of fast-moving objects. This is what an infant is born with, these 3 fears. So if you have a fear of anything other than that, if you have a fear of false beings of light, if you have a fear of the government, if you have a fear of men, a fear of women, women are only going to use you for your money and throw you away. If you have a fear of, doesn't matter what it is. Those fears are not inborn, they are learned. That means that either somebody taught you to have this fear, and in order to be accepted by that person or that group, you adopted the fear so you could merge with them and be part of the group, or you took on that fear as a way of staying where you are. And underneath any long-standing fear is a lack of trust in the universe. So what does that mean? It means that infants are born with an inborn trust of the universe, unless you as the parent come along and talk them out of it, or unless they have a traumatic experience which they choose to hang on to, and then they say, I have to always be afraid of spiders, I have to always be afraid of snakes, I have to always be afraid of tall men with dark hair, I have to always be afraid, and then I have to be afraid of things I don't understand, like incarnating, feeling powerless. These are things you choose your fears, either because somebody gives it to you and you, again, want to be a part of them, so you take on their fears, or because you made the decision because of your experience that in order to protect yourself, you're going to constantly be on guard for this. But in order to hold on to fears, you have to let go of your inborn trust of the universe. And you cannot shift to 5D if you're in fear. You can't do it. You can't, it's not that you can't have feelings of fear, but if you're attached to them and you indulge in them and you define yourself by your fears. You know, people who are have victim mentalities, they define themselves by it. Not only do they define themselves by it, they take pride in I don't believe in this fear planet prison and the false being. I mean, they take pride in that. They'll go on to YouTube and they'll go on to forums and they will proclaim and brag to the world about how much fear they have, thinking that somehow that makes them smart or popular or who knows whatever. So ideally, what does that mean? If the only three fears that human beings in the third dimension have naturally are the fear of falling, the fear of fast moving objects, and the fear of loud noises, it means that we're not afraid of anything else unless we choose to be. So, in the fourth step, we are going to take a look at our resentments and we'll look at our fears. Now, how do we do that? We don't sit around and indulge in intellectualizing on it. It's actually a very simple process, and it has to be done with another person. So ideally, you have a sponsor, somebody who goes through these steps. Now, since I'm starting this program from scratch, that means the first people who do this successfully are going to be people who have already done the steps, but I'm not limiting it to that. Again, I'm bringing this out here because this has been the single most transformative healing process in my life. And I absolutely believe that to shift into another identity, these 12 steps are without a doubt the best, most thorough, the fastest way to do that we have access to at this time. So that's why I'm sharing this. All right, so I'm going to now show you exactly how to do a fourth step. So first we're going to start with the inventory of resentments. All right, so this you can go on onto Google and you can type in fourth step graph or fourth step worksheet, and you'll see numerous things like this. Now, I took one off of the internet that was pretty good. Wasn't completely, there's different versions, but they're all pretty much close to this. And you have what's called the 4 columns. So in the first column, you put who you're resentful at. So I gave an example here, which we'll talk about, but you write down who you're resentful at, and this could mean anything. So obviously we have resentments against people, but you could have a resentment against a place, a thing, an idea, or an institution. I'm angry at the government. I'm angry at North America because it's cold. I mean, you could be angry at anything. Angry at people, places, things, institutions. Okay? And religion, God. You can be angry at anything. You can be angry at yourself. You're probably going to write yourself, I'm angry at myself. I never asked that girl out, whatever it is. So we have the 4 columns. So in the first column, you write who you're angry at. In the second column, you write down the cause, and you try to be as succinct as possible. I'm mad at my ex-girlfriend. Why? She broke up with me. Make it that simple. Don't go into a long diatribe of blah, blah, blah. That's a waste of time. Fact is she left you, and whatever the reasons were are really not as important as the fact that she left you. So, mad at my girlfriend. Column number 2, she broke up with me. Column number 3, we take a look at what it affects. So if you look there on column 3, affects my. Now, these are going to be what they call in some 12-step groups your character defects. Again, 12 steps were written almost 100 years ago, so character defects sounds bad. That's not really what they're looking at. If you read the literature, you find out that these character defects really are your self-defense mechanisms, your preservation instincts that are actually, left to themselves are good and helpful, but when they get out of balance, then they become, they become something that doesn't serve you. They become character defects. So you're looking at a character defects not like there's something defective about me, but that my self-preservation instincts have now gotten bloated and are now out of balance. So the idea is to come back into normal, authentic human balance. But what I've found is that there's only a few fears, and there's only a few character defects, things that it affects. So the things that it affects are the things that we believe we need in order to be secure, in order to be safe, right? So they're all pretty much the same. And every resentment, the character defect that causes the resentment is going to be one of these. And usually it's all of them. Almost always, if I have a resentment, it's going to be every single one of those lists. But it's keep it to this one list. So I've got it here for you. The list here is self-esteem, pride, security, finances, ambitions, personal relations, and sex relations. These are things that are inborn into the 3D human to survive. So, we need self-esteem in order to function. We need pride in ourself. You can call that confidence. Self-confidence is another way of looking at that. Security, being physically secure or emotionally secure. Finances. Finances are important in the third dimension because without them we can't buy or sell or do anything. Ambitions, what you want to do in life. Your personal relationship, that is also your reputation is an even better word. Your reputation in the world. And sex relations. Now, sex is inborn in us. We have this very strong sex drive. We can't get rid of it, but we have it tied in together with all of those things. So if you get sexually rejected or sexually abused, then guaranteed all of these other instincts are going to be affected. Let's say if you get sexually rejected, your self-esteem is going to be affected, your pride is going to be affected, your security, because now you're insecure emotionally and physically, your finances, because you aren't going to feel good enough about yourself to go out and make the money to go find the sex partners. Your ambitions, you're not going to feel successful enough to go out to do anything with yourself because you feel undesirable. Your personal relationships, your reputation to others, find out you got rejected, people are going to look down on you, you think. Obviously, the other sex is going to look down on you. And of course, your actual sex relationship. So you see, just being rejected by a romantic partner is going to affect all of these self-preservation instincts. So, and then we get into the fourth column here. Where was I to blame? My part. And then we've got some, this is an interesting one I chose to use, but you can write down the things that were driving you during the resentment that were the result of that. And then the nature of our wrongs. This is what you actually did to create the resentment. Okay? So I'm going to give you an example in my life. My father's passed away, but he was chronic alcoholic, drank himself to death, and I can remember when I was first going through the steps. Of course, I was very angry at my father for a lot of things, but one of them is that I'd go to visit, from college, and I would go home, and my dad would drink wine. Now, what's interesting is he started drinking wine because I came to him and told him that it bothered me that he was drunk all the time. And that really affected him, but he couldn't stop. He tried to stop. I saw him try to stop, and then he couldn't. He then started buying wine. So he would buy these big carafes of wine. And so you could hear in the house right around sundown that cork what? And you could hear the cork coming out of the bottle, and then he'd pour himself a big, you know, glass of wine, and he would do that all night long. So he would just drink wine all night long, and so, you know, all night you'd hear that the sound of that cork. And it didn't matter where you were in the house; it was so loud you could hear the cork coming out of the bottle, and it would just get under my skin, and it would just, every time it happened, I would just get filled with this rage towards him, you know, for doing that. And so I ended up doing an inventory about that, and resentment about my father's drinking. And at the end of it, when I got to my part, when I got to the fourth column, what I realized is that you know, bear in mind, there's nothing wrong with the fact that I was traumatized and angry over the fact that my father was killing himself with alcohol. Nothing wrong with that feeling. But the fact that I was holding on to a resentment that was destroying me meant that there was something selfish, self-centered going on with me. That is anytime, if you're angry at false beings of light, there's something self-centered, self-seeking about you that is creating that resentment. And if you're not willing to look at that, then that resentment is not going to go away. You can push it down inside of you all it want. It's not going to go away. It's just going to lodge inside of you and make you bitter and angry, and you might even make yourself sick and kill yourself with cancer or heart disease or something else. So it's very simple. After going through all of the things that I just showed you, and I got to what is my part, I realized that my father had the right to drink himself to death. I didn't have to be there. Once I became, 18 years of age, I didn't ever have to go back to that house. It was my choice to keep going back there and, continuing to be part of the family. Nobody forced me to do that. And it was very simple. I wanted him not to drink, and that was selfish of me. He has the right to live his life however he wants. And if he wants to drink himself to death, he has the right to do that. And I don't have the right to tell him how to live. I have the right to make choices about what I do with my life. And so once I was able to get past the resentment and the anger, and then I could realize that there was something I was doing which was controlling and which was selfish and which was unreasonable. Because it's kind of insane to try and get other people to do what you want. You can't. They do what they want, even if it's destructive for them. That's their business. It's none of my business. So once I realized that he had the right to do whatever he wanted, I was able to let go of that. Now, that didn't change the fact that it was still traumatizing and destructive for me to spend time in that environment, so I stopped. I stopped interacting with them. I came to the conclusion, in my early 20s, I said, you know what? These parents that I have, just because they gave birth to me doesn't mean that I owe them anything. I don't owe them my companionship. I don't owe them anything. And, of course, on a social level, that looks bad. And people say, oh, those are your parents. And I'm like, you know what? If anybody else who wasn't a family member treated me the way my parents or my brother treated me, for example, I wouldn't have anything to do with them. So I put that same thing on my parents. If my parents didn't treat me in a way that would make me want to be with them if they weren't my family members, then I wasn't going to spend time with them. Now, that was my choice. And I didn't do that at that point, I wasn't doing it out of anger, because I didn't want anything from them anymore. When I was angry with my dad because he was drinking all the time and I was telling him to quit drinking, it's because I wanted something from him. I wanted my dad to be there for me. I wanted him to love me and connect with me like a father is supposed to do. And that was my desire. And once I realized that I was trying to get something for myself out of that, and that I didn't have the right to force my desires on anybody, then I was able to let go of it. Didn't change the fact that it was sad. He killed himself from alcohol. All of that was very sad. I was very sad when he died. But I wasn't angry with him. and I'm not angry with him now for that. So you have to look at your selfish, self-centered desires, your expectations. You want something and you're not getting it. All right. So let's take a look at it. I threw up an example. It might be a good or a bad example. We'll see if it works or not in terms of 5D, but let's take a look at it. So let's take an example here. This is somebody writes this and they write they're angry at God. Most people are angry at God. The cause: forcing me to incarnate in a family of narcissists who abused me and devalued me. Second, this person has 2 resentments they've listed at God. The second one is forcing me to be trapped in a reincarnation cycle on this prison planet. All right, so that's their feeling about that. So we look at the self-preservation instincts that it affects. Both of them affect the same thing because God is this, very powerful being. So forcing you to incarnate in a family of narcissists, well, that's going to affect your self-esteem because narcissistic people devalue you. It's going to affect your pride, your self-confidence. You're not going to have enough confidence to be able to accomplish anything in life. Security, well, that's going to make you extremely insecure in life because as a little kid, you don't have any control over anything and you got these narcissistic people violating your boundaries all the time. So your security's not safe. Your finances, because, well, first and foremost, they are very bad with finances because they're narcissistic. But then when you grow up, they've taught you how not to be successful financially. And so you're going to blame that on them. You're poor because of their craziness, their dysfunction. It's going to affect your ambitions because growing up in a narcissistic family, they're going to badmouth you whenever you try and do anything. And at the same time, you self-sabotage and you're going to blame that on them. It's going to affect your personal relationships because you now have bought into that whole way of thinking. And so people are going to look down on you or you're not going to be able to have successful relationships because you were never taught to do that. It's going to affect your sex relations, obviously, because all of that self-pity and narcissism gets in the way of you being successful in the dating pool. So that's just the first one, forcing you to incarnate in a family of narcissists. Let's look at the 4th column. So here are the character defects here. It creates in you fear, creates in you self-pity, it creates in you narcissism, it creates in you an unwillingness to take action. And then you look at the nature of your wrongs. This is what it was that you indulged in order to create a resentment. Before we go any further, let's analyze the definition of the word resentment. Resentment is not anger. Anger is a flash. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. You're angry at them for 30 seconds because you almost drove into the side of the road. But once you realize you're going to be okay and they drive down the road, you take a deep breath, you relax, and the anger goes. And you tell somebody later, yeah, some guy almost ran me off the road, really pissed me off. But anyway, I'm fine now, so I can move on. A resentment is an anger that doesn't go away. Resentment means to re-feel. Sentiment, sentire means to feel. To re-feel something over and over and over again. Why do we do this? We have resentments because it creates our identity. You get your identity from feeling secure in I'm protecting myself. You get your identity from feeling insecure, from feeling like a victim. These create an identity within you. And we believe our identity protects us. So you wake up every day, you remember what God did to you. You start to think in your mind the list of all the ways that this world is a prison planet. You start to have feelings about that because you start to feel insecure and afraid and attacked. And that brings up all of your self-defense feelings of anger, resentment, and fear. And then this becomes just part of who you are. And then you go out on YouTube and on, internet forums and you proclaim to the world about how angry you are for being forced to be a victim. And you're proud of it because now it's your identity. So in this fourth part, we take a look at that. This fourth column, we take a look at that. So the nature of our wrongs. This is what you did in order to create the resentment and keep it going. Took comfort in feeling afraid. Kept seeking parents' love by perpetuating my victimhood. You don't realize that every time, if you're one of these people, every time you go on and talk about forcing to be reincarnated in a prison planet, you don't realize what you're doing is you are like a little child having a temper tantrum, hoping that mommy and daddy will come and love you. Now, in order for this to happen, your parents had to tell you. They might have even told you, you're such a frightened little child, grow up. So you got, oh, I'm a frightened little child. Oh, mom and dad wants me to be a frightened little child. Or you just never grew out of that phase where, if you have a temper tantrum long enough, eventually you'll get some attention. Negative attention is better than nothing. It's a desire to be loved and accepted by your parents, but now you've projected it onto the world. Your parents forced you to live in a stifling home, which was like a prison. You go out in the world and now you're forced to live on this prison planet. And you indulge in those feelings so that you can feel as though I'm about to get mommy and daddy's love. I became aware of this really early on in my adulthood, that when I would feel angry and really indulge in it, and I analyzed it, I became aware that I was trying to get God to feel sorry for me. That if I complained enough, that God would finally give me what I wanted. And when I looked at it and I said, that's never worked. The more that I feel sorry for myself and angry that I'm not getting this or that, nothing has ever come along to finally give it to me to shut me up or to appease me. It just keeps getting worse. And I said, this isn't working. So if there is a God out there, this is not how to get God's attention. Feeling sorry for yourself and blaming everything and blaming God. If God exists that way, he doesn't care. But what, of course, I found out later is that when you take action on what you truly want as though you deserve it, then God goes, oh, now finally, there you go. Now you're operating from fearlessness and what you want. Yeah, I'll give you that. But don't just sit there and whine and complain and have a temper tantrum. I'm not, I found out that the universe is not codependent. The universe isn't going to either try and shut you up or try and, not have you be upset with it. The universe doesn't care if you're upset with or angry with the universe for something you yourself either did to yourself or you're not getting for yourself. The universe is not codependent. You can be angry and upset for 1 billion years if you want. The universe is not going to knuckle under and finally give you what you want. But the universe will help you. Like it says, God helps those who help themselves. In other words, if you decide that you deserve it and you want it, then the universe comes and gives you everything you need. But the universe can't give you what you need if you don't take action on it. That's why feeling sorry for yourself, waiting for the universe to come and give you what you need doesn't work, because the universe is like, you can go do it. I'll support you when you go do it. It's like if a parent says, if you decide you want to go to college, I'll pay for your college. But, if you just want to sit at home and smoke weed and play video games, I'm going to kick you out on the street and I'm not going to help you. Oh, you want to go do something? You want to create a business? I'll help you, support you in that. So you end up having a healthy relationship with the universe, because really it's all about mommy and daddy, all of it, when you look at it. So let's look at it again. So fourth step, resentful at God. Why? The cause. Let's look at the second one. Forcing me to be trapped in a reincarnation cycle on this prison planet. Effects: self-esteem, pride, security, finances, ambitions, personal relationships, sex relations. And where was I to blame? I was fearful, full of self-pity, narcissistic, unwilling to take action. And the nature of my wrong in that took comfort in feeling afraid. kept seeking parents' love by perpetuating my victimhood. Spread the fear to others, seeking solace and companionship so that other people would co-sign your fear. And sabotaging myself in the hopes of getting sympathy and ultimately parents' or God's attention. So that's an example of the fourth step the fourth step inventory, the 4 columns. And feel free to go and look at other ones. But bottom line is, the first column you write who you're mad at. The second column you write very quickly what they did. She broke up with me. Third, what are the character defects? What are the self-preservation things? And stick with that list. Don't go beyond that list, because clearly, I'm telling you from experience, every fear is going to have most, if not all of those, and it's not going to be outside of that. So you write down those character defects, and then you look at your part. What is it that you did? The reason I'm angry, my girlfriend broke up with me, is very simple. I had an expectation. I wanted her to stay, and that means I was being selfish. I decided that me getting what I wanted from her was more important than whatever she wanted. She wanted to break up with me. She has the right to break up with me. She has the right to not be with me. She has the right to live her life however she wants. And it's selfish of me to try and keep her from going after whatever it is that makes her happy. And it doesn't mean that I can't be sad about that. But being sad isn't the same as being resentful. Resentment is about trying to control, which is a fear-based survival 3D mechanism. And by looking at this, ideally, you can get rid of that. Now, besides the 4-column aspect of looking at your resentments, there's also looking at fears. And so it says we looked at our fears even if we didn't have any resentments associated. So again, you're born with 3 fears: the fear of falling, the fear of fast-moving objects, and the fear of loud noises. If you have any other fears than that, those are things that you've learned and indulged in. So let's take a look at the fear one. Okay, so here's another graph I just pulled off so you can create this. So let's say somebody has a fear of aliens. So you write again who you're afraid of. I'm afraid of ETs, extraterrestrials. When did the fear start? I watched the film Communion in the 80s by Whitley Strieber, and his, horrific experience of being abducted by aliens. I saw that in the film, and that frightened the hell out of me. How did I perpetuate the fear? Well, then I started researching alien abductions. I started watching Anunnaki videos on YouTube where they told me that Anunnakis were reptilian alien creatures who came to Earth and created human beings and used them as slaves, and et cetera, et cetera. And now I had even greater justification for my fears. And now I was really afraid of the whole prison planet thing. And then how the fear imprisoned me into the 3D fear prison. Choosing to believe that humans are helpless victims of Anunnakis. That is a choice. Remember, you have the choice to believe whatever you want. You choose to believe that. That was not my choice. This is a mythical person here. So choosing to believe that humans are helpless victims of Anunnakis, reptilians, and false beings of light. And finding comfort in being afraid and conflating fear with the knowledge of the truth. In other words, just because you have a strong fear doesn't mean it's true. So fears are there, but again, fears are a feeling and feelings are not facts. Once again, there's only 3 fears that you're born with. Every other fear you have is created later. And the assumption behind that is if the physical body is born to only have 3 fears, then there's only 3 things you really need to be afraid of. And the thing about those fears, if you have a fear of falling, real simple, just move back from the edge of the cliff and that fear will go away. You're afraid of fast-moving objects. Well, something goes, a branch comes falling down, and once it falls and hits the ground, then you're safe because now that branch isn't going to hit you. It hits the ground, makes a huge noise, or there's a lightning strike and thunder, and there's a very loud noise that frightens you. And the moment you look around and find out everything's okay, the fear disappears. So fear is not meant to be long standing. Fear is meant to be very quick. It's a feeling, and it's designed to do one thing, which is to get you out of immediate danger. And once you're out of the immediate danger, the fear disappears. So if you're having continuous fears all the time, it means that you are in you're in an insane mind frame because you're not in reality. If there isn't something right in front of you physically threatening your life, there is nothing to be afraid of. And the assumption behind that is because the universe will take care of you. The universe will give you everything you need. Babies know this. Otherwise, babies would be born with a fear of financial insecurity, a fear of not being loved, a fear of living in a prison planet, a fear of going to hell, a fear of, not being saved and, having Jesus accept you. They would be innately afraid of these things. So since they're not, it means they have nothing to fear. So if you are full of fears, then you are filled with a bunch of false fears that you have either been programmed and then chose to continue believing in, or you created them in an attempt to control your reality. Again, control comes from fear. And once you realize that that's an insane way of functioning and that it doesn't serve you, then you can release them. And you can operate from the assumption, which is that the universe wants to give you everything. So whether we're talking about resentment means that you didn't get something that you wanted, period. Now, don't get me, I'm not trying to minimize it. You got beat up every day by your dad. You have every right to not want to get beat up every day. You have that right. But to be angry after the fact, you're now no longer living at home. There's nothing physically wrong with you. And you have all that emotional trauma. To hold on to that and to stay angry at something that isn't happening right now, while understandable, doesn't serve you. It keeps you from being your true self, and it keeps you from experiencing life. So you have to get rid of that resentment. And, when you look at, I'm angry at my dad. What? He's not hitting me now. I can't be mad at him now. He's assuming he's not in front of you. Maybe he's dead. People will still have these resentments, long in after all of their family has died. So is anything happening to you right now? You're angry at your dad. He beats you every day. Is he beating you right now? No. So in this moment, there's no reason to be angry. It doesn't serve you. That's something that happened in the past. You can't deny it. So you look at what was your expectation. Your expectation was you wanted your daddy to love you and keep you physically safe. And he didn't do that. And he hurt your feelings deeply, as well as your physical body. And so you wanted him to love you the way a father should. And it's insane to hold on. He clearly didn't have the ability, whoever this person is. My dad didn't do this to me, but let's assume yours did. He clearly didn't have the ability. So it is irrational of you to want somebody who's clearly got an emotional and mental problem, because no sane person strikes their kid. No sane person devalues their kid. So they're clearly insane. They're clearly got a problem. So it's irrational to expect an insane, irrational person to give you what is rational and to give you what you want. So when you just own, I wanted my dad to love me and he didn't, it makes me very sad. You can drop the anger, you can feel the pain and move on. And then you get to live your life. So resentments are a sign of insanity. It means you're not in objective present reality. You're trapped in the past, and the past isn't here now. The past can't hurt you unless you keep recreating it. All right, so that's my talk about the fourth step. Now, the fourth step doesn't do any good if you don't do the fifth step. So we'll talk about that later. But you have to have somebody that you take this to. So if you don't have a sponsor, then you find somebody you can trust. Go get, therapists are well versed, at least in the knowledge that this exists. And if you want to just get one appointment with one psychologist and say, I want to do my fifth step with somebody who will understand, because you can't just grab just somebody off the street and say, listen to this. Maybe you can, maybe you can tell it to a friend, but it's best to do it to somebody that has sort of a mentor kind of a relationship. So get a session with a psychologist. Do you have a mentor? Do you have a spiritual teacher? You can even go to confession. You can go to a Catholic church and say, I need to go to confession, and say, I'm going to read my fifth step. As long as you're sharing it with somebody, ideally with somebody that can, understands it and can listen. But if they don't understand how the steps works, you at least have to tell somebody. And the reason is you have to get it out. There's something that happens when you get it out. There's some shift that happens in your brain. And then you'll be ready for step 6 through 12. All right? But for now, you don't have to worry about telling anybody. You just write this stuff down and look at it and look at how you created these resentments and how you indulged in and created these fears. All right, there you go. Next video on this subject will be step 5. Until then, my friends, I wish you all the best, and I will see you next time.